Welcome into the PFN Bengals podcast. I am Dallas Robinson. He, as always, is Jay Morrison. Jay, the Bengals won on Monday Night Football against the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that was looking to compete for the number one overall seed in the conference, with Jake Browning under center. I almost can't believe I'm saying these words right now. It was an unbelievable game, a 34-31 overtime victory on Monday night that I don't hate to say it. I love to say it. It might have the Bengals back in the playoff race. We'll get into all of that and where the Bengals are in the AFC playoff picture and where this puts them in the postseason race and all that. But I think the first thing we have to get into is Jake Browning, who just looked, absolutely incredible. He was 32 of 37, only missed 5 passes, looked good in basically every component of last night's game. Jay, I think we've had our concerns about Jake Browning, I think, dating back to the preseason. But this performance, to even show something like this against a Jacksonville defense that was no slouch coming into this game, like they were playing really well coming into this game. You've got to feel good about Jake Browning moving forward, and you have to have much more optimism about this Bengals team than you had after last week's loss.
Yeah, it'd be foolish to say you saw it coming. Nobody saw that coming, but we talked about it on the pod last week. His strength, what they would do really well with him are those fakes and the boots and the rollouts, and they were just handcuffed against Pittsburgh. You just can't do that against Pittsburgh with those ends and the way they're lined up. And last night, a lot of 6-man protections, 7-man protections, a lot of rolling out. They played to his strengths. And you think about 5 of those incompletions. One hit Tyler Boyd in the hands. It wasn't a perfect throw. It was an early one, but it was, maybe it was Tyler's fault. Maybe it was Jake's fault. Another one he intentionally threw in the ground when nothing was there. So really, like, only 3 passes incompletes. It just remarkable. 86%. You just don't see that in the league anymore. And maybe you do, and maybe it's a lot of checkdowns. And what we saw early in that game, he threw for 354 yards. I just thought that was, Zach takes a lot of criticism for his play calling. I thought that was great last night, what they did, where early on you're like, what in the heck is this? What's going to be all game? And it was just those quick little short passes out to Chase. They weren't getting anywhere, but they got him in a rhythm. They got him. I talked to AJ McCarron last week about, the being a backup and coming in, and he said it's like a basketball shooter that you need to see the ball go through the hoop. You need to see completions, and you just settle in. And I thought that was a great analogy, and that's what we really saw last night. That and the run game. The run game really helped out Jake Browning in that game, and I looked it up. They started with 2 consecutive handoffs. How many games do you think it's been since they've done that? Pick a number.
25.
21. It was the Pittsburgh game coming out of the bye last week. In the Joe Burrow era, they've started 7 games with back-to-back handoffs. 3 of them not with Joe Burrow quarterback. One with Ryan Finley, one with Brandon Allen, and then of course Jake Browning last night. So it just incredible performance from Jake Browning. And once they got those early ones out of the way, he was making some throws. The one to T over the middle inside the 5, the one to T on the 3rd and 10 for 11 that got him into field goal range for the game winner was a hell of a throw. Obviously, the deep shot to Jamar Chase. It was just, I don't know. There was a lot of people slamming the Bengals for not having a quality backup, and one game doesn't make a career, but I think if you're looking going forward, what we saw last night is more indicative of what Jake Browning can be than what we saw in week 1 against Pittsburgh. Not week 1, but his first start against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about it on this podcast about the opportunity that Jake Browning has for himself to be the long-term backup here, the long-term backup at the NFL. And I just think if you can show a game like that last night, you obviously have some level of talent. And we knew that Jake Browning did, right? He had an amazing college season at Washington and went to the college football playoff. You don't typically go that far in your football career without having some base level of talent. And he's a very intelligent guy. And the Bengals coaching staff was confident they could run the offense with him. But I think the Bengals offensive staff showed, like you said, that they're going to lean into the run a little bit more and let that help Jake Browning, right? I looked at some data from Ben Baldwin's site. On 1st and 2nd downs, the Bengals ran the ball 28 times. They passed the ball 29 times. extremely balanced on those early downs. And I think that's critical when you've got a backup quarterback to let him give him a little bit of breathing room, right? And not make it so challenging for him on every single play. But you still have to give the credit to Browning. And I know he had, a lot of his yards came on like run after the catch, and that's fine, but he was still putting the ball in the right spot, going to the right receiver. You saw him barking out calls and adjusting protections before the snap,
Yeah.
too. The pre-snap stuff. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of backup quarterbacks that are necessarily doing that kind of work before the snap. Um, this week, Jake Browning was number one in completion percentage over expectation. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So
Mhm.
as much as this offense was scheming play receivers open for him, he was still finding guys that maybe other quarterbacks wouldn't have found and hitting passes that other quarterbacks might not have hit. He was number 3 in EPA per play on the week and number 4 in QBR. I mean, there was really nothing not to like about this performance.
Yeah.
Um, I just think I do think it gives you some encouragement that, yeah, and we'll get into whether the Bengals are actually in the playoff race or not, and we know it's going to take a lot for them to get back into this race. I still think you have to feel good about, that this season isn't just going to be a tank job for the rest of the season. And I don't think we ever thought the players or the coaching staff was going to feel that way. But maybe from a fan perspective, we thought without Joe Burrow, this season is going to go down the drain. I mean, you and I we're starting to talk about draft position and free agency, and why wouldn't you, right? I mean, that's kind of how it
Mhm.
felt after last week. That's kind of how it felt like we were, and it's just a really good feeling, I think, to see this type of turnaround. And it's not like they were playing the Carolina Panthers, the New York Giants. They were playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, a really, really
Yeah.
solid team. And I think it feels really. I think you have to feel really good now. Let's talk about those trick plays, Jay. I think we talked about all the positive stuff that happened. A couple trick plays that just that were totally botched. Something I tweeted out last night. I couldn't believe I was typing it, but how do you take the ball out of Jake Browning's hands in those situations
Mhm.
when he was playing so well? Zach Taylor defended those plays after the game, and I get it. You're trying to get some creative level of way to generate offense with a backup quarterback. I get it. But, obviously those couple of plays, especially where you're asking Tyler Boyd to throw the ball and throws an interception right to Josh Allen, a defensive end, essentially creating a huge swing there in favor of the Jaguars. What do you think of those plays, Jay? I mean, it's I couldn't believe they did 2 in one game, honestly, and so close together like that. You think that'll be something they'll do going forward? I don't know. They were so botched. I wonder if it makes them eliminate those from the playbook moving forward.
Zach loves them, so I think we will see them from time to time. The interesting thing, so the first one really confused me because I
Mm.
didn't know the one where Chase slipped down and then threw it to Browning. And I was just confused whether was that supposed to be a double backward pass and then Browning was going to
Yeah.
chuck it down the field, or were they trying to get Browning in space? And he is very athletic, and if you get
Yeah.
him out there alone, but then when Chase slipped, it blew everything up. It blew up the timing. As soon as Browning caught the ball, there's a defender right there to drop him for a 7-yard loss. I just don't know what the concept of that play was. The one that Boyd threw the interception, we've seen it before,
Yep.
and we've seen it work for big plays. 46 yards, I think it was, at New York 2 years ago. In 2020, they did it against the Browns for a big first down. Tyler Boyd can throw the ball. He's got an arm. They practice this play all the time. But Zach talked about it when they practice this play. It's vanilla looks. You don't have that muddied situation that they had last night. And we see quarterbacks do this all the time where they throw the ball right to a guy they just didn't see him. Tyler Boyd's not used to throwing. I mean, he just never saw Josh Allen. And so I think where a lot of people have issue with that is not the play call itself, it's the timing of it.
Mm-hmm.
You're at your own 25. It's one play after the Jacksonville Jaguars just tied the game, and now you're giving them another short field and they go in. I mean, they get 14 points in a matter of seconds, and it looked like that could have been it. And Zach said that could have been it. I mean, really impressive for the team to rally and come back from that. But on the other hand, I kind of get it where maybe, I mean, I'm sure Press Taylor is very aware and letting the Jags defensive staff
Mm-hmm.
know that this play to Tyler Boyd's in the book. And so they try a different play, and maybe that kind of takes that off the radar and they're not expecting the one there. And it's like, okay, you get the big lead on the bomb to Jamar. The
Mm-hmm.
Jaguars come back, steal all the momentum to tie it. What better way to steal that momentum back immediately than to try to hit a play that's worked in the past? But it was risky, and that was Zach's point. Yet you can't be scared. You got to be aggressive. You got to call these plays. If they don't work out, so be it. He trusted the team. But yeah, it was just in the moment. It's like, what in the world? And then you go back and you think about and you look and you see when that has worked before.
Mm-hmm.
So I know it's funny because he takes criticism all the time about being vanilla and not being creative on offense, and he gets creative and he gets slammed again because it didn't work. Just
Yeah.
the remarkable thing about it is they overcame it, and that's on the road in prime time where they haven't won in forever. They were 4-35 when trailing going into fourth quarters, and that mess up there made it a 28-21 deficit going in the fourth quarter, and all the momentum swing, just more so than the botch trick plays, was how the team responded and came back from that and won the game.
I think you're right. And I think specifically on those trick plays, look at how scoring and offense is down around the NFL, right? I mean, you look at how defenses play offense now, it's all about stopping big plays, stopping explosive plays, keeping everything in front of you. When you've got a backup quarterback, I think that's even going to be more of a focus on the defensive side of the ball. So I think you're seeing actually more trick plays like this around the entire NFL because offensive coordinators are just kind of at wit's end with how to get chunk yardage because it's just not happening against defenses that are just lining up in cover two with two deep safeties and they're saying you're not going over the top. You've got to kind of generate these big gains with trick plays like this. So I know it didn't work, and I agree it's risky, but I think if you look at it from a process standpoint instead of a result standpoint, I think you can see why that type of play will probably stick in the Bengals playbook and be something that they do moving forward, and hopefully get more success next time and not have it go like it did on Monday night. What about the defense, Jay? The defense, I mean, we talked so much about this kind of bend but don't break unit that Lou Anarumo has, and they broke on several times on Monday night. They gave up almost 400 yards. They allowed CJ Beathard to come in, the Jaguars' backup quarterback, after Trevor Lawrence got hurt, and drive down the field for a game-tying field goal at the end of the fourth quarter. But they held on in overtime. So again, we're kind of back to that bend but don't break mentality in terms of just actual points being scored. There were, several interesting plays, I think, on defense. The most notable one that we have to talk about was Dak just missing that interception in the end zone. I mean, just an unbelievable turn of events there. Absolutely huge swing in the game. I think that just like that trick play could have really kind of been one of the nails in the coffin for the Bengals last night. Again, we have to talk about how they overcame that kind of adversity. What do you think of the defense? I think big plays are still an issue, but there's a little bit to get excited about in this defense, though.
Yeah, so you look at it, and there were 6 explosives. What I'm looking at as explosive as a pass play of more than 20 yards.
Mm-hmm.
I think the longest was 26, and that was the first play of the game.
First play, yep.
It was 26, 25, 24, 22, 21, 21. So they gave up those big chunk plays, but they weren't 30, 40 running for touchdowns. They got the guys on the ground as soon as they gave up the pass. So yeah, you don't want to give up that many, but I thought they did a really good job tackling last night. I thought the D-line did a really good job of, getting pressure on Trevor Lawrence and moving him around and making him uncomfortable, and just horrible, the injury to him. Everybody hates to see that. And that was a pressure situation where I don't know why he pulled the ball back down. He went to throw it and he pulled it back down. And then that's when Walker Little stepped on him right as Trey Hendrickson hit him and kind of bent him over after Walker had stepped on the ankle. But I thought the D-line BJ Hill played a hell of a game. He had some really big stops. I thought the secondary did a really good job of tackling, not just when those guys got the big gains, but coming down support in the run game. I thought Mike Hilton had a really good game as well. So it was kind of a classic Lou Anarumo game where you give up a lot of the yards, but they played well in the red zone. I really thought they were going to come up with a stop on that first one, and Trevor Lawrence just plowed it in from 1 yard out. They've had 8 red zone trips by opponents that ended in no points whatsoever. That's tied for most in the league. I thought one of those they were going to take over the league lead, but Jacksonville did convert all their red zones into points. But I thought it was a step forward. It sounds crazy to say 31 points and all those explosives, but it didn't feel as disjointed as maybe some. And yeah, I mean the Pittsburgh game they only gave up 16 points, but it just
Hmm.
I don't know. It felt like a step forward. They're Sam Hubbard's back to 100%. Their playmakers were making plays. Jordan Battle continues to impress. Um, you're not going to face maybe the rest of the way. I can't think of a team that's going to stress a defense the way Jacksonville does with their speed. Now, obviously, they lost, very first play of the game, lose Kirk, but
Yeah.
it's not going to. I mean, Indy doesn't have guys like that. Minnesota's got Justin Jefferson. That could be a problem, but it felt like maybe a baby step forward for the defense.
No, I definitely agree, and you're right. It's hard to say that when you see 31 points a lot on the scoreboard, but that interception from Tyler Boyd put the Bengals defense in a bad spot, obviously, and led to
Yeah.
points. And there was other opportunities like that. You're right. I think BJ Hill and DJ Reader both had excellent games. DJ Reader showed up consistently. PFF, I think, credited him with 6 pressures, second on the team behind Hendrickson.
Wow.
So really, really solid game from him. And he'll be a free agent at the end of the season, and so will Chidobe Awuzie, who I think had a pretty good game too.
Mhm.
We didn't talk about Cam Taylor-Britt's been sent to IR, so he was gone for this game and at least 3 more games. So Cheeto's right back in there in a full-time starting role, and I think acquitted himself pretty well. We've talked about whether he'll be back next season. I don't think that's likely, but for a guy who I think has been up and down this season, who's getting closer to 30 and who's looking for looking for one more deal this offseason, this is probably the type of game he wanted to have for his own, it's looking forward to his future
Absolutely.
contract. If he can continue that, I think he'll probably find a nice deal for himself next offseason.
There was a moment late in that, I can't remember when it was, but he was down on the sideline for a little bit. He was really
Mhm.
slow to get up, and it's like,
Yep.
what's he got going on now? So that'll be something to monitor as we go forward. Next up at this point would be rookie 7th round pick DJ Ivey, who they like a lot. I mean, he made the 53 coming out of camp, and
Yeah.
he's been mixing in on special teams. But I mean, we don't know yet what's up with Cheeto, but I just noticed that where he was
Yeah.
really slow to get up, and I think they were on the verge of blowing the whistle and you're making him take at least a play off. And
Yeah.
he got back in there and he finished, so that was a good sign.
Yeah, it actually brings up an interesting point. I wonder what they would do at outside corner. Like they don't have a ton of depth remaining. Um, a lot of people thought Daxton Hill could play outside corner when he was coming out of college at Michigan. They've got Nick Scott, who they've obviously benched, but if it came down to it and things got dire, I wonder if you'd see Dax Hill at outside corner and put Nick Scott back in his starting safety role.
Yeah, it'd be. I mean, I don't know. They do like DJ Ivey, but do you want to stick a rookie 7th round
Yeah.
pick in that spot?
Exactly.
I mean, maybe it's the devil you don't know, because I mean
Yeah.
they know what they've got in Nick Scott. They put Nick Scott back in there and moved Dax to corner, and I think it's going to be problems. He has not played well this year, and they've been working him. They haven't benched him. He's still coming in and playing a third down.
Still has a role. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know that you want him on the field for the
Yeah.
majority of the snaps.
So I think we have to talk about now whether the Bengals can make the playoffs. I mean, this didn't seem like a realistic option when Joe Burrow went down. Didn't seem like a realistic option after the Ravens game. Certainly not after the Steelers game. If you look at some of the playoff predictors, and we have ours at PFN, you can look at the New York Times, you can look at ESPN's FPI. If you look at those playoff percentages, they're not great. Obviously, if the Bengals are down, 6, 8, 10%. I think that's obvious. Anyone that understands how the playoff picture works, they have a lot of teams they would have to leap over to get back in the mix. But last night, what I think was incredibly encouraging. If you can get this type of performance from Jake Browning in this offense, they could really beat anybody. I mean, I don't think you can say that lightly. If you can beat the Jaguars and put up 31 points with Jake Browning, you could probably compete with anybody in the NFL, just on a base level. Then you look at the rest of their schedule. We've talked all season about how difficult the schedule is going to be and how difficult this gauntlet end of season is going to be for the Bengals, even with Joe Burrow. It's not really looking like that anymore because Bengals are the only team dealing with quarterback injuries in the NFL. 4 of their next 5 games could be against backup quarterbacks. Josh Jacobs is in Minnesota. Gardner Minshew is playing for the Colts. Mitchell Trubisky will probably be the Steelers starter when the Bengals face the Steelers. If he's not, I'm not sure there's that much difference between Mitchell Trubisky and Kenny Pickett anyway. Patrick Mahomes, you might have heard of him. He's pretty good. But then the Browns, maybe they'll be paying Joe Flacco. Maybe it'll be back to Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Maybe they'll be on PJ Walker, another turn for him by that point. Who knows? Either way, it's a backup quarterback there too. Lots of backups coming on the schedule, Jay. I mean, we know it's a long shot, obviously. They'd probably have to win 4 of their next 5, get to at least 10 wins, I would think, to get back in the mix. But there's a shot. There's a legitimate shot now that they won last night's game. I think you have to say that.
There is. And I mean, Patrick Mahomes is still the best on the planet, but that offense is flawed. I mean, I got it. They had some changes, and I thought, okay, they're going to be slow getting going, and they're gonna pick it up, and they just have not. And Lou Anarumo, he's got Andy Reid's number. I mean, they beat him 3 out of 4 times. The Chiefs have not been the Chiefs in really, maybe in one the game that the 37-34 game, the Chiefs offense played really well, but they've held them under their average in yardage and points, and so. I'm not saying they're going to go in there and beat them. There's a long time to go before New Year's Eve, but it does. It really opens up, and you look at it in the playoff predictor. The Bengals had a 3.4% of making it per ESPN's FPI before last night. It's up to 12.5 now. I mean, it's a substantial leap after one win. They play the Colts. They can get a head-to-head advantage on them. They've already got a head-to-head advantage on the Jaguars. Who knows how long Trevor Lawrence is out? If you're a Bengal fan, you're rooting like heck for Houston to win that division and to put Jacksonville down in the mix in the wild card, because the Bengals are going to struggle to win tiebreakers because of their conference record, 2-6 now. But head-to-head against Buffalo, head-to-head against Indy if they win this week, head-to-head against Jacksonville now. So that path is there. I think a lot of people think they don't have a chance because of that poor start and that AFC record. But if they're going to get there, they're going to win all of these games or 4-1 down the stretch. All of a sudden, that conference record is going to be back in the 500 range where everybody else is going to be that's going to be in that mix. So it's not crazy. And I went and I looked, not just, those percentage chances on the FPI is based on who the opponents are. And it's specific to this year.
Yeah.
When you go back and you look at teams that started 6-6 since the current division alignment in 2002, 59 missed the playoffs, 27 made it. That's a 31.3%. That's a 1 in 3 chance. If you'd ask Bengal fans before yesterday's game or any point in the last 3 games during that losing streak, if they would take a 1 in 3 chance of making the playoffs, everybody'd sign up for that. So it's not crazy. It's still a lot of work to do. What they did Monday night doesn't cover up everything. It's one game. That's the way that the league works. But I do think that they can make this very interesting down the stretch. And, the Indy Open is a 3-point favorite. It's already down to 1.5. I like the Bengals' chances against Indy. You mentioned Minnesota, Josh Dobbs. It may not be Josh Dobbs. He played so bad in that Monday night game against the Bears. They might be going back to Jaron Hall. Who knows where they're going to go at quarterback. So I think you feel really good about their chances of winning these next 2 games and going to Pittsburgh with a whole lot on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Pittsburgh and Cleveland losing this past week was huge too. I mean, that the fact that they lost, that helped, not only the Bengals, but I think a team like the Bills that's still trying to fight back and get in this race. You look at this AFC wildcard race. It's not exactly the most impressive crop of teams, especially crop of quarterbacks. I think the teams that I would be the most worried about, I think, are the Houston Texans and the Buffalo Bills, who both of whom, like the Bengals, wouldn't even be in the playoffs if the season ended today. I don't believe. I think the Bengals do have a chance at which, like you said, is not something I would have said after last week. But I just think if you look at how Jake Browning played, and I don't want to excuse that performance against the Steelers. And like you said, I think backup quarterbacks can be very mercurial, where they can look amazing one week and absolutely tank the next week. There's a chance that Jake Browning comes out next week and looks like the guy we saw during the preseason or during the Steelers game. We don't know. I think it's very up in the air, but I also think there's a good chance that he settles somewhere in the middle, right? And somewhere between that amazing performance we saw last night and kind of the poor play that we saw against the Steelers and in the preseason. I think even with that kind of middle of the pack quarterback performance, given the other weapons that the Bengals have, We didn't even talk about Jamar Chase and another incredible statistical performance from him last night. Uh, if this defense, I think, can get anywhere back on track, and like you said, I think they showed some positive steps this week. I think you've got to feel good that they can at least compete going down the stretch. And I do think that's important for this locker room, for this team morale. I don't think the Bengals were ever going to give up. We talked about that, but man, I don't think it would have been great for this team if they had finished the season with, 5 wins, 6 wins, something like that. Go into the offseason, have to dwell on this poor season. And I
Mhm.
think at least competing and getting some level of fight throughout the rest of the year, even if they end up not making the playoffs, I think that's pretty important for a veteran team like this with a roster of guys who are for the most part going to be back next year.
I complain about this all the time on Twitter, that the mindset of the fans when things go south, and when they win a game like last night. Twitter's just such a fun place. And one of my favorite tweets that I got, and I'm sorry I can't remember who sent it, but it said, "Last night proved what we knew all along. Joe Burrow is a system quarterback." And it's just, I mean, it's crazy that, yeah, everybody's criticizing Zach
Yeah.
Taylor and saying Joe Burrow brought him along. And I mean, if this continues, it's not Jake Browning with a lot at stake. I mean, Zach Taylor will get a lot more credit than I think people are willing to give him if they can do this. And
Yeah.
you mentioned Chase. I did want to mention one note about him, because I looked 3 straight years now with 1,000 yards receiving, and that, to start a career. Obviously, he's the 8th person in NFL history to do that. The list is pretty remarkable. Mike Evans did it his first 10 years
Mhm.
and counting.
Yep.
This year he's at 10. Randy Moss, 6. Another Bengal, A.J. Green, 5. Michael Thomas, 4. Justin Jefferson, 3. That's going to come to an end this year with all the time he missed. John Jefferson, the old Chargers receiver, 3. And Odell Beckham Jr., 3. So Jamar in great company
Yeah.
there. And I think people forget he only played 12 games last year, and he still had 1,000 yards. He
Right.
didn't get the 1,000 till the season finale, but he got it. So heck of a run by him. I'm not saying he's going to challenge Mike Evans, but he can easily
Never
move
know.
into, yeah, Mike Thomas at 4, and then I think AJ Green's in reach at 5. So I thought it was interesting too, because he went over 1,000 on that 76-yard
Mhm.
bomb. I was like, well, when did he hit 1,000? So I went back and I looked. Last year, he went over 1,000 on a 17-yard touchdown catch against the Ravens in the season finale that made it 17-0, a really big spot.
Mhm.
In 2020, he went over 1,000 on a 37-yard touchdown against the 49ers. It got overturned on replay, and then he came back in the fourth quarter, caught a 17-yard touchdown pass that left him 4 shy of 1,000, but then he got it on his next catch. He had, I don't know if people remember, huge comeback in that game, 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. So
Mhm.
he doesn't just get to 1,000 yards. He's kind of got the flair for the dramatic to hit that 1,000 yards, and no greater evidence of that than last night with that bomb for 76, longest play of the year for the Bengals.
Yeah, he makes them count. He absolutely makes them count when he
Yes.
catches them. Let's get into next week's game. So the Bengals are facing the Colts next Sunday. It's absolutely a huge game if the Bengals want to make the playoffs. The Colts are ahead of them in the AFC playoff picture. The Colts would be in the playoffs if the season ended today as a wild card team. Um, the Colts are kind of in a similar position to the Bengals. I mean, they've got a backup quarterback too. They've got Gardner Minshew. I think Gardner Minshew is, he's a different quarterback than Jake Browning, but I think if you're the Bengals, you'd be happy if Jake Browning turned into Gardner Minshew long term, right? I mean, I think he's one of
Yeah.
the better backups in the NFL. He's kept the Colts, him and Shane Steichen, who I think has been really impressive in his first year as the Colts head coach, even after losing Anthony Richardson. I mean, to be in the playoff picture with this roster, I think about where the Colts were last season. Jeff Saturday is their head coach, blowing that massive lead to the Minnesota Vikings. I think to be in this position, you've got to actually give them a lot of credit for where they are. What are your thoughts on this game, Jay? I mean, this is a winnable game. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt
Yeah.
about that. This is a winnable game. We can get into the details here in a second, but what are your just kind of overall thoughts on the Colts and where the Bengals line up against them this Sunday?
Well, I mean, I haven't seen the odds, but I think Shane Steichen should be one of the candidates for coach of the year. It's just remarkable what he's done, losing his starting quarterback, where he's brought that team to. Zach Taylor's won 7 of his last 8 games against rookie/interim head coaches. So take that for what you will. The one loss was D'Amico Ryans and the Texans this year. I don't know. Indy's won 4 in a row. But you look at who they've beat: the Panthers, the Patriots, the two worst teams in the league.
Yeah.
Buccaneers aren't very good. And then it took overtime to beat the Titans. Well, I know the Titans beat the Bengals, but that seems like forever ago, way back in week 4. The Titans are not a good team. They're 4-8. The Colts really had no business winning that. I mean, the Titans botched 2 punts that got their special teams coordinator fired.
And their punter out for the year.
Yes, a very, very good punter. It was just brutal. But Minshew, he's just one of those guys where you look at the tools and but he's got that it factor about him. He's a leader. He makes plays when they count. I mean, I think if this game is close, the Bengals fans should be concerned if the Colts have the ball last with Gardner Minshew driving him. He has that knack about him. But they're not going to have Jonathan Taylor, their running back. Zach Moss is a more than capable backup. Cool game. Alec Pierce, UC star, coming home, homecoming for him. The one thing, their defense, DeForest Buckner and Taven Bryan in the middle, that's where the Bengals have been kind of susceptible to pressure. And maybe it's not as big of a deal with Jake Browning, the way he can get out of pocket, and they get him out of pocket by design. But that would be one thing I would watch is the pressure. I thought Jacksonville was going to be a problem pressure-wise. And the Bengals O-line, really the last 2 weeks, I know people don't want to hear about Pittsburgh. I thought the O-line played really well against Pittsburgh. I thought they played great last night. And if that continues, and not just in pass blocking, but the run blocking, obviously, if that continues, this team can get where they need to go, and they absolutely can beat the Colts. I can't see this game being more than a field goal game either way. It just feels like that kind of dirty December AFC North kind of feel.
I agree. I think my thing would be when the Bengals have the ball, the Colts are 9th in DVOA against the pass. They're 26th against the run. I think this is going to be another game where the Bengals are going to have to focus on the run game. And they showed they would do that last night against the Jaguars. I think it's going to be a similar game plan. I think you will see, you're right that pressure could come from the inside. I think if you can stick to the run game, get Chase Brown going like he was last night. I mean, we didn't really touch on Chase Brown. He was incredibly impressive last night. We finally got to see him be a part of this offense, get some work alongside Joe Mixon. I think that's kind of the element that this team has been looking for in that backfield. And you look at it, you hate to make too lofty of comparisons, but could this be something of a thunder and lightning combination over the rest of the season? Look at how Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard were used last year for the Cowboys, right? Use Zeke in short yard situations near the goal line. Use Chase Brown and try and get these big chunk plays. Use him in the passing game. I think that's a really interesting kind of way to get Jake Browning going, especially against a team like the Colts. Gus Bradley is their defensive coordinator. They're going to play as much cover 3 as anybody in the NFL. They're going to have a deep safety in the middle of the field. They're going to try and stop these vertical passes. They're going to try and stop Jamar Chase and T. Higgins from getting down the field. So how are you going to beat that? You're going to beat that in the seams and the flats. I think that's how that Bengals are going to have to beat this team. That means a lot of Chase Brown and Joe Mixon catching passes. That means maybe Tanner Hudson going up the seam and having another big game. He's consistently been involved both with Joe Burrow and Jake Browning under center, right? I think if you're going to throw the ball to Chase, I think it's going to be tough to hit those deep shots. But I do think the Colts are going to be in a lot of off coverage. And what does Jamar Chase do really well? Evade tackles and create yardage. I think you're going to see a ton of short little hitch passes, little quick game throws to Jamar Chase, and just let him create, because the Colts' defensive weakness is at cornerback. I'm not even going to list their cornerbacks, because frankly, I don't really know anything about them. They don't have much going on in the defensive backfield. They've got Kenny Moore in the slots. So he's pretty good, but their outside corners are not great. I think that I have a lot of faith in Zach Taylor and Brian Callahan to design an offense that can attack this defense. I think you'll get some high-low concepts that are gonna put a lot of these cover 3 defenders in conflict. I think you'll see some run pass option looks that are going to put defenders in conflict. I bet we could get out of this game, and I think we could have around the league have a lot higher view of how Zach Taylor and Brian Callahan designed this offense, because I think if the Bengals can win this game, you'll have seen them put up 34 points against the Jaguars. And if I'm right about how the Bengals are going to design their offense against the Colts, I think you'll see a really well-crafted offense that attacks the weaknesses of this Colts defense that I think is gonna shine a good spotlight on how Zach Taylor kind of runs this offense.
I think the Chase Brown is a good point. They need to see more of Chase Brown, and they need to see less of Chase Brown. And what I mean by that is they were way too predictable, and I'm surprised the Jaguars didn't catch on. He only had 11 snaps, and they handed it to him on 9 of them. You can't be that predictable. Like, oh, the guy's in the game, he's going to get the ball. So they need to work him in a little more where it's not guaranteed to go to him. The one thing that really impressed me, we knew Chase Brown had wiggle. We knew he had speed and explosion. He was a tough runner last night. He had some where he slammed it up in there, nothing was there, and he's dragging guys. I didn't know he had that in him. It was Mixon like there where, you just slam into guys and fall forward and get another couple yards. That's what it almost impressed me more than the 31-yard run, which is the longest of the year for the Bengals. That kind of stuff. He was really, it was kind of like Samaje Perine, where you don't realize it until you start seeing it over and over again. It's like, yeah, he can stick his nose in there and get the tough yards too, as opposed to being really good in the pass game and in space. So I think we're going to have to see, and I think it can be that thunder and lightning situation. You go back to the years of Mixon and Geo. It can be very similar. I know a lot of people are wringing their hands. Where's Chase Brown been all this time? I think that you forget this was a very compromised offense early in the year, and it takes a while for rookies to come along and get the full grasp. You're not going to stick a rookie in there when you've got Joe Burrow playing on one leg. They were just getting ready to give him the bigger role coming out of the bye, and he got hurt. He missed 4 games with the hamstring. So I get it. People are like, where's this been all year? But there are reasons why it's taken this long to get him involved. And maybe it's for the best. I mean, you've got a guy that is fresh as fresh can be when everybody else is worn down. He can be a real weapon in December.
No, that's a really good point. That's a very good point. And I think he will. I think we'll see him more in the field, more and more as the year progresses. One you mentioned Alec Pierce. The Colts do a couple good receivers. Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce both went over 100 yards on Sunday. Pretty much Alec Pierce's first breakout game of the year. So I'm curious to see how the Colts keep using him. And we know the Bengals are susceptible to explosive plays, if anything. So Alec Pierce, that is his game, is that deep ball, as anyone who's a UC football fan remembers from his time with the Bearcats. I think this will be a very good game. I think it'll be a close game. Let's go ahead and get into our predictions for this week and our bets, Jay. I think we're probably on the same page for how this the Colts Bengals game is going to go. But let's talk about our non-Bengals bets for the week. Let's rehash how our bets did last week. How did we finish up last week, Jay?
Yeah, so let's rehash that, because you and I went head to head on both of our picks last week, and I won them both. I had Bengals +8. You had Jags -8. I obviously won that. And I went with the dead cat bounce, Carolina +5. If you've disciplined enough to do it and only bet on teams that fire their coach the next week, you will make money. And it happened again. Carolina +5. They cover against Tampa Bay. You had Tampa Bay -5. Brian Lewis, our betting director, big week for him as well. He did a money line parlay with the Texans against the Broncos and the Lions against New Orleans. Now, it was only a +140, but his $10 bet got him 14. And then he took the 49ers Eagles over 46.5. So he won $24 on the week. He is now at +14 for the season. I won 20. I am at -2. I'm very close to even money, which is a win when you're betting. And sorry, Dalton, but you're down to -70. It might be parlay time for you to try to get back into this.
Well, you called me Dalton, and my name is Dallas, but you had to put that poor record out into the open. It's just can we just move on from this segment? This is.
I was thinking about Dalton talking about you, about what a great week you had picking straight up, and so yes, my apologies there.
It's been bad. It's been bad for me this year. Let's get back on track. Let's get back on track this week. I'm going to pick the Denver Broncos +3 against the Los Angeles Chargers in Los Angeles. I used to be a huge Brandon Staley guy. I loved all his analytics talk when he first came in the league. It's just a mess for the Chargers. Yeah, they won on Sunday, but it was 6-0 against the Patriots. I mean, how can you feel good about that? The Broncos lost. It was against the Texans. It was a close game. Broncos are on the upswing. They're look like a much better team to me than the Chargers right now. So I'll take them against the Chargers.
If you're Bengals fans, you're rooting for the Chargers in that one.
Yeah.
Denver's another team you got to knock out of that 6-6 range. My non-Bengals bet, and this is another one that it's just by rule, and if I did it with Iowa, I would be broke right now. But when you see an over-under at 30.5, like New England and Pittsburgh, take the over. I mean, there's going to be defensive touchdowns. There's going to be turnovers or short fields. It's just crazy. New England, Pittsburgh, over 30.5. It's just the 9th time in NFL history that an over-under has been under 31, and the over has hit in 6 of those 8 previous times. So,
Bailey Zappi versus Mitchell Trubisky. I'm sure Amazon is very pleased about that. What did Brian have for this week's bets?
Brian actually has a Bengals bet. So his non-Bengals bet this week, he's going Raiders +3 at Minnesota.
Okay.
I don't know how to feel about that. That would be a game I would never touch. It just feels like, I don't know. His Bengals bet, he's pairing it. He's doing a teaser again. He likes the teasers. So he's bumping the Bengals up from 1.5 to 7.5. And he's bumping the Bills up from 2.5 against the Chiefs to 8.5.
Okay.
So interesting one. I don't know that I would bet against Patrick Mahomes, but I do feel like Buffalo could cover 8.5 in that game. And they're at home.
Yeah.
Are they? Or is it in Kansas City?
No, it's in Kansas City. It is in
Kansas City.
Yeah. But I think I could probably cover 8.5 though.
Yeah.
Okay. So for my Bengals bet, they're a 1 point underdog, correct? That's what I saw. Did you see
1.5 is what I saw. We can go
roughly this. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to take the money line either way. I'm going to go with the Bengals. I'm going to go with the Bengals with this one. You said you can't see it being more than a 3-point game earlier. I totally agree. I'm going to go Cincinnati 24, Colts 21. I just think these two teams are, pretty similar. They're obviously similar record wise. I think they're in a similar position from a backup quarterback perspective. I just don't know that there's enough to separate these teams and see a blowout either way. I just really like what the Bengals did. I like what Jake Browning did last week. I was so impressed, and maybe this is recency bias. This is a weird week. We're coming off the game last night. We're on a high from watching that game. I think Jake Browning's a Hall of Famer now. All of that. I still feel good about the Bengals. I do think they're more talented than the Colts from top to bottom. And like we talked about, I think this is a game where Zach Taylor and Brian Callahan will really kind of sow their oats here and show the NFL that they can design an offense that can attack defenses with regularity. So I'm going to go Bengals 24, Colts 21.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's a big regression to the mean game for the Colts. I mean, like I said, 4 in a row, haven't really beaten anybody of quality. I mean, the Bengals aren't juggernauts, obviously, but this is a big step up for them. It's on the road. I think Bengal fans are going to be rejuvenated. It's going to be a good atmosphere in Paycor Stadium. I'm going to stick with the dirty, muddy, ugly score that I think this game's going to be. I'm going to go Bengals 19, Colts 16 in a field goal fest.
Yeah, that's a gross score. That's a really gross one. I love picking those kind of weird numbers. 1916 isn't that weird. 24-21, my pick is a very standard pick, but I do like picking those weird numbers, especially game like this could get weird. You never know. I mean, a couple backup quarterbacks. This could be a weird one. This could be some very strange result on Sunday. The Bengals have a lot to they can kind of make up some ground this Sunday, Jay. We will be back next week to talk about this massive game. Do you have anything else you want to go over before we sign off and look ahead to this huge game against the Colts?
No, just looking forward to next week's podcast. I'll have more than 3 hours sleep. We decided to do this one on our normal schedule. Went to bed at 4 a.m., but I'm feeling good. I'm feeling energized. There's a lot more fun things to look up when it's a performance like that. So I don't know. I kind of had a feeling something like that would happen. I didn't predict it. Obviously, I picked the Jaguars to win, but I think it wasn't a fluke, and it wasn't a anything can happen in the NFL type of thing. I really think we saw something that we're going to see more of the rest of the way. It doesn't mean they're going to make it into the playoffs, but I think December and January are going to be a lot more fun than Bengal fans thought it was going to be just maybe 24 hours ago.
Yes.
So it is. It's going to be enjoyable to watch, and even if it is 19-16.
Yeah. You cannot help but be encouraged after last night.
No.
All right. Well, we will be back next week to talk about this Colts game, win or lose, and see where the Bengals are in the playoff race. I mean, this week has a lot on the line. So make sure you come back next Tuesday. We'll talk about this game. We'll talk about the rest of the season. We'll talk about where the Bengals are in the playoff picture. Thanks again for listening. Give us a review, give us a like, and subscribe on YouTube. We will talk to you next week on the PFN Bengals podcast. Thank you again.